As we enter our third year, we are delighted that KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerges as the talk station of choice for African American listeners. In a vigorous public opinion research study, the 2023 African American Media Issue Survey finds that for the second consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 remains the most trusted, credible, and reliable media source in Southern California for African Americans and beyond. Furthermore, 80% of those surveyed agree that outlets like KBLA Talk 1580 provide honest and authentic content about the issues most important to the Black community directly from Black journalists who understand the issues that need to be addressed. At KBLA Talk 1580, we remain committed to curating conversations that matter to you. Thank you for your continued support. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. The station that sounds like the city looks. The city looks.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you tuned into our program today. I should mention once again that tomorrow in our second hour, we'll continue our tribute to Tony Bennett. Hope you enjoyed our tribute to him in the first hour today. Tomorrow, the second part of one of my favorite conversations with Mr. Bennett in his illustrious career. That's tomorrow in the second hour of this program. In this hour, joined by legal scholar, author, and activist Kimberlé Crenshaw for a conversation about her new text, #SayHerName, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. The book offers an analytical framework to comprehend the unique vulnerability of Black women to police brutality and state-sanctioned violence. In the text, Professor Crenshaw also explores the transformative power of Black feminist storytelling and ritual, empowering communities to advocate for racial justice. Professor Crenshaw, good to have you on. How are you today?
I'm good, Tavis. Good to be on.
It's good to have you on. Let me start with not the book, but a piece that I saw that you authored recently for the LA Times, an opinion piece, and the headline was, or is, Black women are the unseen victims of police brutality. Why aren't we talking about it? Black women are the unseen victims of police brutality. Why aren't we talking about it? Of course, the piece written on the occasion of the publication of the book, #SayHerName. But into this piece specifically, I want to go and start by asking the question that the headline poses: why aren't we talking about it?
Well, Tavis, this is part of a longer and deeper problem that we've experienced in anti-Black racism, how it's conceived, how we organize ourselves, what are its exemplary moments. And that problem has largely been that the way that racism intersects with sexism and patriarchy isn't something that we talk about a lot. We tend to see what happens to Black women as happening somewhat downstream or ancillary to, and not so much directly a subject and a target of anti-Black racism. So it's not surprising that the ways in which we imagine anti-Black police violence don't have in them ways in which we understand why Black women are more likely than any other group to be unarmed when they're killed by the police. We don't think about that as readily as we think about what we know, which is black men are victimized in part because black masculinity has always been frightening to the white status quo. So we get that, we understand that, and therefore we can metabolize the stories more immediately. We don't so much get where black women figure into racism, into white supremacy, into white fears, into disregard and disrespect. And so consequently, the things that happen because of that take us a little bit longer to integrate, metabolize, and then resist.
I want to talk a little bit later about the confluence of factors that converge to make black women and girls the most vulnerable of all women to state violence. You sort of already teed that up, but I want to talk more directly about that. Let me ask first, though. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask anyway. You're not suggesting, with the publication of this op-ed or the publication of the book, which we'll talk about again into this hour, you're not suggesting that there's too much focus on the hell that black men catch from the police, are you?
No, and actually in the book, I say it many times, it's almost a chorus because I have experienced what it is like to talk about the fact that we also need to acknowledge that black women are killed by the police. Look, when we started Say Her Name, during the Eric Garner rally, we were marching, we were chanting, we were, demanding accountability for the murder of Eric Garner and Mike Brown and so many others. And then on the offbeats, we would say Tanisha Anderson, who was killed, just within days of Tamir Rice, or Michelle Clouseau, days within Mike Brown's death, saying that we need to say their names too. And there were still some people. Let me be clear. Most people are like, yes, thank you for raising this. We're going to include our sisters from now on. But there are always a few who will think that when we say black women are killed too, we have to include them as well. Their families aren't suffering any less. Mm-hmm. That somehow that is seen as, so you're saying that we're spending too much of our rhetorical and emotional energy on black men. So for everyone who wonders that is emphatically not what the book is arguing. What the book is arguing is anti-black police violence, it impacts all of us, and it impacts us across all genders. And for us to have a powerful, inclusive movement, we have to be able to elevate the stories that we have not heard.
Black women make up around 10% of the female population in this country. About 10% of the population of women in this country are black, and yet they account for 1/5 of all women killed by the police and almost 1/3 of unarmed women killed by the police, as you heard Professor Crenshaw say a moment ago. When we come forward, the confluence of factors that converge to make black women and girls so vulnerable. You're listening to Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw on Tavis Smiley.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community, Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and, they're putting their money where their mouth is at, So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community. And, you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase and, give them, another look if I go to another institution. I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right. Chase is doing their part to help advance black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
On your period, sudden gushes happen without warning. But now, you can say goodbye to stand-up gush fears, thanks to Always Ultra Thins with rapid dry technology. It absorbs gushes 2 times faster than the leading store brand and gives you up to 100% leak-free protection. Hello, clean and comfortable with always Fear No Gush.
Shop end-of-season deals during the Truckload event at Lowe's. Right now, save on major appliances and get an additional 10% off in-store clearance appliances. Plus, take up to 50% off select patio furniture and accessories, and save on select grills and outdoor power equipment. Great deals are happening now, in-store and online. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid through 7/26. Exclusions apply. While supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details.
Ew. Gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried new Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in 1 wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
In our community, mental health struggles can sometimes go unnoticed. The suicide rate among Black youth has risen faster than any other ethnic group. Only 1 in 3 African Americans who need mental health care receives it. African American women are only half as likely as their Caucasian counterparts to seek professional mental health services. Even those who guide us spiritually can sometimes face their own challenges. 45% of pastors say they've experienced depression or burnout to the extent they need to take a leave of absence from ministry. As people of faith, it's time to acknowledge it's okay not to be okay. You can pray and get help. Visit normalizehelp.org for more information and resources. Join us in raising mental health awareness in our community. Funded by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health and the Champion Counseling Center of Faithful Central Bible Church.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley. I'm grateful to have you tuned in to our program in this hour. Our guest in this hour is Kimberlé Crenshaw, professor at the Columbia University and UCLA Law Schools and executive director of the African American Policy Forum. Her new book is called #SayHerName, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. In case you've just tuned in, I think this stat bears repeating. Black women make up about 10% of the female population in this country, yet they account for 1/5 of all women killed by police and almost 1/3 of unarmed women killed by the police, which leads me to ask this question to continue our conversation. Why, Professor Crenshaw, black women and girls are more likely than any other group of women in this country to be killed by police?
Well, Tavis, first of all, is because black people are more likely to be killed more than any other group. Mm-hmm. So we understand that blackness is a risk factor. It's a risk factor, number one, because we have more police encounters. And we have more police encounters because we have constitutional rules that allow police officers to pull us over to begin an encounter based on mere traffic infractions, whether real or simply used as a pretext for pulling us over. So we have very permissive rules around how a police encounter can start. We also know that policing resources are disproportionately fixed on communities in which we live. So we just start with a greater exposure to policing just off the bat. And then second, we have to take into account that black women are often with black men who are being disproportionately policed. Mm-hmm. So while driving while black is a risk factor for all black people, riding while black is a particular risk factor for black women. So black women have also been killed when police open fire on cars in which a suspect meets the description, or after a car chase. Melissa Williams, for example, in Cleveland, the police were chasing a car driven by her partner. They thought they heard gunfire, which was basically backfire from the car, and they chased them for miles. And when they finally stopped them, the police officers jumped up on the hood of the car and pumped multiple bullets in it, knowing that at least one person was a passenger. Same thing happened with India Kager. So I can give you many names of black women who were killed in the company of black men. So again, this is black people are being put at greater risk. But then there's a subdivision of risk that is particularly gendered and has something to do with what I just heard the public announcement about mental health. When police officers are tasked to be first responders on mental health crises, they are brought into proximity to black women who are in crises. Police officers are not well trained to deal with mental health crises. That statement that to a hammer everything looks like a nail, to a police officer, everyone who's seen as non-compliant is engaging in criminal activity for which massive force is frequently deployed when that body is a black body. So Tanisha Anderson, who I mentioned earlier, the police were called to help because she was in a mental health crisis. What they did instead is a takedown move, just like George Floyd, and they held guns on the family as she was dying. They were unable to help her. So it runs the gamut, Tavis, of the same things that happened to black men, then black women being with black men, and then black women being in health crises or in other circumstances in which police are called in.
To your point, we don't know the names India Kager. We don't know the names Tanisha Anderson. That's the point of this book, hashtag say her name. And yet many Americans do now know the name of Breonna Taylor. I raise that because Breonna Taylor is no different. She fits, I should say, inside the frame that you just created. She was with a man, and they were looking for somebody. And so she ends up being dead. She's not the person they were looking for, but she ends up the person dead, of course. I come to that because it seems to me that while we don't know the names of India Kager or Tanisha Anderson or Kayla Moore or Michelle Shirley, the names of all these women that you call out in this text, we do know the name Breonna Taylor, and I want to ask how it is and why it is that we know her name. Put another way, what happened in this particular instance that we did, in fact, learn how to say her name?
Yeah, that's an excellent question because, in fact, for the first several months after she was killed, most people didn't know her name either. So we encountered exactly the same kind of, we don't know what to do with this narrative. We can't really recognize it. It happened in the home. It was a no-knock warrant, but it was a woman who was not the target of the investigation. So initially, Tavis, people weren't saying her name. It was George Floyd's death that drew attention to black death at the hands of the police. Say her name was already a hashtag at that point. So it was able and capable of, at that moment, of extending to include Breonna once the effort to say we are not going to take this anymore became a rallying cry for people all over the country. So one of the essays in the book about Breonna Taylor asked whether this is a turning point. Is this a moment like the Emmett Till moment was, where, of course, there had been many people who had lost their lives in obscurity, but his case was one in which the whole world was able to see and attach a name to the underlying brutality that was white supremacy in the South. And it changed a generation. It led directly to that generation that was the freedom riders, that was the civil rights movement, to say we are all at risk from this expression of white supremacy. So I query, and I think the jury is still out. Is Breonna Taylor that name that shifts? Does it open up the possibility that from here on in, when we think about anti-black police violence, women are right up in that mix? Or is it just Breonna Taylor and Sandy Bland? That's the question of the moment.
So I take that last response to mean that you're not convinced that it is, in fact, a turning point.
Well, we haven't really seen evidence of it yet. We do see, and I take this as a win. We don't see names of just men in our rallies. When people talk about it, at least Sandy Bland gets mentioned. At least Breonna Taylor gets mentioned. So that's an advance. But what we want to do is get beyond those two cases, because underlying those two cases are conditions that have to be discussed, and new policies have to be created to address the vulnerability of Black women. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're hoping the book helps to do. It's both delivering information, Tavis, but it's also embodying the imperative. People are encouraged to say their name along with the book that is saying their name, along with the practices, the rituals that the book helps people to participate in. So it's a call in that does the thing that Say Her Name is asking people to do.
We'll talk about those practices and rituals as we move through this hour. In case you've just tuned in, our guest is Kimberlé Crenshaw, author of the new book, #Say Her Name, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. How am I to read, Professor Crenshaw, that Black females are the group most likely to be unarmed when they are killed, and yet that does not stop officers oftentimes from using lethal force?
Well, this is where we get to the particular ways that anti-Black racism has misshaped the perception of Black women and girls. Moya Bailey's term, misogynoir, I think, is helpful here. It's a combination of misogyny and anti-Black racism. So what do officers see when they encounter a Black woman? Well, when the police were called to Michelle Cusseau's house on a mental health pickup order and killed her within seconds of the encounter, clearly they did not see a damsel in distress. Clearly they did not see someone who was frightened. Clearly they didn't see someone who just wanted to stay in their own home. So what was it that distorts that encounter that makes the police officers say, she didn't say anything to us. It was just the look in her eye that made me know that my life was in danger. What are they seeing when they can say that lethal force was justified because of the way she looked? It's hard not to read that into all of the ways that Black women have been seen as hostile, have been seen as angry, have been seen as superhuman, have been seen as constituting a threat to armed officers. So racism has actually distorted even the possibility, the perception of Black women as women. We are more likely to be misseen as men because of the way Blackness has been framed as violent, has been framed as quasi-animalistic, has been framed as unreasonable and out of control. So we see this happening in multiple cases. There's Natasha McKenna, who was hooded and chained to a chair and tasered to death. You can't imagine that happening to a white woman. Race is likely the reason why.
I want to come back to why white women are spared, and I'm not naive about this. But I want to come back to that point in a moment here. But I'm stuck on this phrase, this comment you made a moment ago of Black women often being seen as superhuman. We know that narrative well about Black men. In fact, the data is incontrovertible when it comes to how white officers oftentimes see Black men as threatening and superhuman. The same applies to Black women as well?
And that's what's so, damning about misogynoir, because all of the things that one would think go along with, well, at least women will be spared from this, don't tend to apply to Black women. Let me just raise it even further. Many of these Black women were killed in the presence of their children. So even the maternal instinct that many people think spares women from some of the worst aspects of violence, like we're not going to do this in front of her kids, or she's a mother after all, don't tend to apply to Black women. And it also means that it doesn't apply to Black children. Actually, the greater disproportionality in police violence, greater than even men, Black men to white men and Black women to white women, is Black youth to white youth. So even children are not given the benefit of being children when it comes to police violence. So once again, it underscores the fact that it is our Blackness that compromises their ability to see us as human, and instead create in them a sense that we need to be the recipients of disproportionate disciplinary force. That's the only way, the argument goes, that police officers can be safe, and we just have to expand it. It's the only way American can be safe. We have to have these deeply punitive policing practices. That is what links all of this together under the rubric of anti-Blackness.
I'm looking at my clock here, and I know if I ask this question, it's not going to give her time to really drill down. So let me just tell you where I want to go when we come forward with our guest in this hour. Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw, professor at Columbia and UCLA Schools of Law, executive director of the African American Policy Forum. A new book is called #Say Her Name: Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. We'll get to that public silence part as well later in this conversation. Trust and believe. When we come forward, though, I want to come right to this question, which I, again, am not naive about asking, which is why Professor Crenshaw believes that white women are spared. Again, the data is pretty arresting here, given the percentage of the population that Black women represent as compared to the number of women who are killed by cops in this country. Why, then, are white women, and for that matter, other women, spared when it comes to their interactions with the police? Again, the book is called #Say Her Name: Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. The author of that book is our guest in this hour on Tavis Smiley, Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The Justice Department is giving Texas an ultimatum: remove a floating barrier from the Rio Grande or get sued. At issue is a floating border barrier made of large buoys anchored to the river bottom at an area called Eagle Pass. In a letter to Republican Governor Greg Abbott, the feds called the barrier illegal and said it poses serious risk to public safety and the environment. Abbott maintains that Texas has the right to defend its border. All football activities are being suspended at HBCU Florida A&M University. Friday, football coach, African-American Willie Simmons, announced via Twitter that all football-related activities are banned after an unauthorized music video was shot inside the school's locker room. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
We have a SIG alert in the Port of Long Beach on the 710 northbound at Ocean Boulevard. That on-ramp blocked with an overturned big rig. Heavy traffic in the area. 10 westbound at Crenshaw, clearing a wreck off to the right shoulder. Pretty slow there from Arlington out to Robertson. 405 North Drive, reduced speeds between the 110 and the 105, then gets extra busy up toward the Santa Monica Freeway.
Looking for a late-night spot to get the crew together? 3 words: Buffalo Wild Wings. They've got drinks and apps starting at $4 from 10 p.m. till close. B-Dubs, where late-night food and drinks start at $4. Cheers to that. Limited time at participating locations. Offers, days, and times may vary. Drink responsibly. Void or prohibited. Tax and fees extra.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The NBA no longer has a black majority owner. The league's board of governors formally approved the sale of the Charlotte Hornets, ending a 13-year run for Michael Jordan. Jordan was the NBA's only black majority owner. owner. The Hornets now belong to a couple of rich guys named Rick Schnall and Gabe Plotkin. Jordan paid $275 million for the Hornets in 2010. He and his investment team are taking home $3 billion. The Hornets made the playoffs only 3 times under Jordan's watch and were bounced in the first round each time. They won only 41% of their games, the 4th worst record in the league in that 13-year stretch. Florida A&M football coach Willie Simmons suspended all football activities at the HBCU school until further notice. An unauthorized rap video was made in the team's locker room. The administration is investigating. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? You might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
You can do it all by yourself, baby girl. What's your name? Let me talk to you. Let me buy you a drink.
Spilled your drink? Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up spills quicker. And each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less than the leading ordinary brand. So you can get back to your night. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands for Unity and Healing. African Focus Incorporated is a nonprofit organization based in California that focuses on the growth and well-being of Africans all around the world. Their mission is to promote the well-being of people of African descent through knowledge and appreciation of one another by building a bridge of love and understanding. African Focus Incorporated strives for cultural, educational, and economic growth. They're the organization behind the African Family Induction Ceremony, African Goodwill Awards, African Focus Trailblazer Tours, African Dance Competition, and Showcase Los Angeles, Family Day, Good News Windows Microfinance Project, and more. To volunteer, travel with African Focus, or to attend one of their community building events, please call 310-676-7730. That's 310-676-7300. Or visit AfricanFocus.org. This is a diaspora-wide community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley. We continue our conversation now with Kimberlé Crenshaw, author of the new book, #Say Her Name, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. Professor Crenshaw is a professor of law at both Columbia and UCLA Schools of Law and executive director of the African American Policy Forum. We're talking in this hour about the ways in which black women's vulnerability to police violence has been normalized in this country. Before that break, I said I wanted to ask Professor Crenshaw, as I will now, again, no naivete here, about why white women and other women seem to be spared. Why are their lives spared when they come in contact with cops, and the lives of black women so often tend not to be, Professor Crenshaw?
Well, Tavis, I think if we just do the reverse of the factors that make Black people and Black women disproportionately vulnerable, we'll begin to paint the picture. These are structural reasons. These are biased reasons, and they are class-based reasons. So, we all know that structurally, police are in the position to patrol, to contain, to maintain, sort of order. And that has long been a racialized project. We understand that from the very beginning. That means that they are disproportionately in one place, and that means not in another place. I mean, it's kind of, people driving around Beverly Hills don't have to worry about the police pulling them over and an encounter becoming potentially fatal. Folks in South Central do. We understand that. That's just, part of our understanding of how policing is a racialized project. But then we add to that what's been known as implicit biases. It's one of these topics that DeSantis and, the anti-woke people have framed as an illegitimate, divisive concept, but it explains a lot about why one person in crises is talked down and another person in crises is shot dead. One is going to be seen as in need. Another one is going to be seen as a threat. The very field of implicit bias started with being able to show that when people are primed to see Black people, they're more likely to see inanimate objects as weapons than they are when they're primed by images of white people. So whiteness puts people in a situation, in a mindset in which they don't think that they're looking at a dangerous situation. Blackness does its opposite, and gender does not arrest that. So that's part of the reason why the encounters don't go as quickly, as badly with white women as they do with Black women. Now, some of the folks are going to point out, and I will do it for them, in absolute numbers, more white women are killed. In absolute numbers, white people are killed. But when it comes to the fact that Black women are the group that is most likely to be unarmed when they're killed, it tells us that the threat that they're seen as, the violence that produces, is a greater risk for Black women than any other woman. I mean, there's the video that we've been seeing from Lancaster with the police officer taking the Black woman and throwing her on the ground. There have been so many. Marlene Pennick was beaten on the side of a Los Angeles freeway by a police officer with both fists. We've seen Black women being manhandled everywhere. Some Black women don't survive that. That is what Say Her Name is drawing attention to.
Let me pivot gently, if I can, to make this point. I've said many times on this program and elsewhere that I knew that America really wasn't interested in being serious about the gun violence issue when they killed those white babies at Sandy Hook. Because you can explain anything else in this country in a frame of racism, misogyny, et cetera, but when they start killing white babies, and that seems not to matter to the nation, it was clear to me that it's going to be a while, if ever, before we get serious about gun violence. I raised that. I pivot to that because we're talking now about women, Black women in this case, who are often killed, as you said earlier, in front of their babies. It matters not to cops that babies are present oftentimes when Black women find themselves on the wrong end of a police gun. And yet virtually none of these officers have been held accountable. That's what I'm driving toward. That they're killing women in front of their babies. As you said countless times in this conversation, these Black women tend to be unarmed more than anybody else when they come into these situations with cops. And yet, with all of that said, these officers tend not to be held accountable. How do I read that?
Yeah, you have put your finger on it. I mean, there are virtually no circumstances in which officers are routinely held accountable. I will point out, however, that in Minnesota, a black officer was convicted for killing a white woman because, she ran out. She had called the police because of a reported rape or a suspicion of rape, and she startled the officers, and she was killed. That led to a conviction. That led to accountability. But, of course, the opposite is almost unimaginable. I think what this drives us to is a couple things. Number one, the Black Lives Matter protest, the mobilization around George Floyd led to a much-needed conversation about reducing the footprint of policing in our society. And concretely, when we look at some of the stories with black women, we can see some of the places where that would make a difference. Police should not be first responders in mental health crises, just full stop. But police should also not be empowered to use lethal force on minor infractions. Some of our women were killed because police were trying to serve orders on traffic warrants. Why are we sending police into people's homes to serve traffic warrants? It's ridiculous. And, of course, Sandy Bland, a lane change and refusing to put out her cigarette. So it's the over-enforcement, the over-investment of power in individuals when they put on a uniform that has led to so much bloodshed. It also helps to underscore that when we deprive other institutions of the resources they need, we over-criminalize things that should not really be seen as criminalizable. We lead to disproportionate encounters with people whose main training is on how to maintain control, not how to maintain safety and the lives of people with whom they've come into contact.
Our guest in this hour is Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw, law professor at both Columbia and UCLA Schools of Law. Her new book is called #Say Her Name, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. When we come forward in this conversation, I want to ask her something that may be a bit uncomfortable for some of us to wrestle with, but we're gonna wrestle with it anyway. And that is, to what extent black folk writ large are complicit in the normalization of what's happening to black women at the hands of cops. In what ways are we complicit in that? We always advance this refrain that we, black men, have to take care of our women. I hear that, but in what ways are we complicit in the ways that the realities that we're discussing in this hour have become normalized in our culture? I also want to ask Professor Crenshaw when we come forward about how we go about resisting the erasure of this narrative. The lives of black women that do matter. I'm thinking of Sonia Sanchez and that powerful poem, Resist, Resist, Resist. How do we resist their erasure? And then, of course, we'll talk about those practices and rituals which are included in the book. You're listening to Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw right now on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley, recipient of the prestigious Freedom of Speech Award at Talkers 2023. More of Tavis when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you heard about Lendistry? Lendistry is a national black-led small business lender that is headquartered right here in LA. Once you've started your business, Lendistry provides flexible financing options starting at $50,000 to help you access the affordable capital needed to grow. Whether financing is needed to increase working capital, acquire a business, purchase inventory and equipment, or refinance debt, Lendistry has a solution for you. Lending products range from traditional business term loans and non-revolving lines of credit to SBA 7A loans and commercial real estate financing. Lendistry's pre-application process is simple and does not impact your credit score. Visit lendistry.com/KBLA to learn more and to get started with an application right from the website.
I'm James Alexander, a proud member of AARP. 1967, I was 17. That spring, my friends, the Barcades, and I made Soulfinger. It was a hit. Number 3 on the charts. That summer, we became the Great Otis Redding's Band. First gig, the famed Apollo. That fall, we toured. That winter found me in a morgue identifying the bodies of my bandmates and Otis Redding. My music and their memories bring me joy. The Barcades, forever.
What would you call a joy that is as solemn as it is sweet and knows no bounds? A joy that's beautifully rooted in soul and resilience. This is Black joy, a joy that reflects pride and honor despite every challenge. AARP believes the power of Black joy is limitless, and we celebrate this joy supreme. Join us in celebrating Black joy at aarp.org/blackcommunity.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
The rent is too damn high. KBLA joins you in calling for affordable housing. The LA Tenants Union is a diverse, tenant-led movement fighting for the human right to housing for all. The LA Tenants Union demands safe, affordable housing and union rent control. They organize against landlord harassment, mass evictions, and displacement, and mobilize for the repeal of the Ellis Act and Costa-Hawkins Act. The LA Tenants Union is on a mission to strengthen tenants' political power through education, advocacy, and direct action. To get help with your eviction or other landlord-tenant issues, take action for justice, or become a member, visit latenantsunion.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, can potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw, in what ways, if you believe that we are, in what ways are black people, black folk writ large, complicit in the normalization of black women's vulnerability to state violence?
Well, Tavis, on this, I have to lift up the voices of some of the mothers, because they come to Say Her Name, which is a space that we've created for mothers and sisters of women and girls killed by the police to find community with each other, to support each other. And they come in often telling us that one of the most difficult dimensions of their grieving is the fact that they're often grieving alone. They look around and they see that there isn't a widespread community response to their daughters or sisters losing their lives at the hands of police. But beyond that, there's sometimes the sensibility that somehow the women did something to get themselves killed. Gina Best is the mother of India Kager, and India was traveling with the father of her child, introducing the infant to all of his family in Virginia Beach. The police trailed them for hours, knowing that they were in the car, and decided that they wanted to effectuate an arrest that began with a flashbang grenade and ended with both India and her baby's father being killed. In response to that, many, even relatives, basically said, well, she shouldn't have been with him. That's the consequence of the collateral risk that black women have that is sometimes downstream from men. So when they end up being killed, Gina says this is something like rape culture. Well, what did you do to get yourself raped? What were you wearing? The same thing is often asked of black women. And we don't often ask that of other of our community members who get killed. So there's something about gender that makes people think if you're the right kind of woman, you're in the right kind of place, you do the right kind of things, bad things are not going to happen to you. We see it with respect to sexual abuse. It turns out it also applies to police abuse.
Our remaining moments with Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to gear with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you earn at the end of your first year, which means... Wait, hold up. Question for the audio engineer.
Go ahead.
Did I read that right? Discover automatically doubles all your cash back?
Yeah, that's what the script says.
So if I get a Discover card right now, I can earn twice the cash back.
Apparently. Wait! Unlimited first-year cash back match. Only from Discover. See terms and learn more at discover.com/match.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities and sports figures, elected leaders and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
I've got just 5 minutes left in this conversation, and there are at least three things I want to get to. Let's see how fast we can move Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw to cover all three of these in these 5 minutes. Let me start with this. Ron DeSantis, who you mentioned earlier in this conversation, is in the news once again. He has doubled down this morning, doubled down on his argument that black folk benefited from slavery. That's Ron DeSantis' framework, that we benefited from slavery. He's doubled down on that once again today, even as he continues his efforts in Florida to erase black history, black voices, and, of course, black lives. The question I want to pose now is how we go about resisting the erasure of black women's encounters with the police. Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw.
Well, first, Tavis, we have to resist the erasure of our experience writ large, right? Because what DeSantis is about, what the entire anti-woke cabal is about, is trying to erase our experiences of within white supremacy, erase the past, so that we don't have to deal with contemporary consequences. All debates about the past, all debates about history are about politics today. If we can say that slavery wasn't that bad, if we can say that we've learned skills, then we cannot say that the continuing dispossession in terms of our wealth, in terms of our property, in terms of our health, has nothing to do with what was done to us. That is what the attack against black history has been. That's what the attack against critical race theory has been all about. And that's why we need to double down on our familiarity with exactly what they're trying to erase. When someone is trying to take away something from you, it's because it's valuable. So if we don't know what this history is, if we had no idea what the attack about critical race theory is, we do know it was trying to take something away that was ours. That should have meant we should have put everything on the table to defend it. That's why we're in this situation now. That's why we have to get it together and not let them take away our history, because that's taking away our future.
We'll close our conversation in a moment talking about your critical race theory summer school. Before I do that, right quick, though, there more detail, of course, about this in the text, but just give me a top line for some of the practices and rituals that you talk about in this new book, #SayHerName.
Well, Tavis, December 14th is the anniversary of Say Her Name. Every year we do a virtual event and a live event. It asks people to come together, to light candles, to pour libations, to solemnly repeat the names of black women who've been killed by the police. But we also have a play that we invite people to view online, in which we imagine what the lives should have been of these women. So the book provides guidance and encourages people to do their own rituals. And of course, there's songs and there's poetry. So the book can be found at any bookstore and also at aapf.org.
That book is called #SayHerName, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. We've spent the better part of this hour unpacking what is inside that text. I close by offering you an opportunity to talk about critical race theory and your summer school program, Professor Crenshaw.
Well, Tavis, every year, this is our 4th year, we've had a virtual classroom, critical race theory. This year, it is fighting back to move forward, defending the right to learn. And it couldn't be more timely when we have people in Florida basically saying slavery was, a vocational training program for black folk. We really need to understand what's at stake in the effort to take away black studies, what's at stake in the effort to rewrite history, what's at stake in the attack on affirmative action, voting rights, reparations. This is a place where mass communities can come together to learn from folks in the field and, importantly, learn a skill to fight back. So summer school starts July 30th. Runs to August 4th. You can register at aapf.org, and there are scholarships for anyone who wants to attend. No one is turned away for lack of funds.
AAPF.org is where you get all the information. She said a moment ago, and by the way, AAPF stands for, in case you don't know, African American Policy Forum, of which Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw is executive director. In addition to that, she's also professor of law at both Columbia University School of Law and UCLA's School of Law. And her most recent book we've been discussing in this hour is called #SayHerName, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. In the 30 seconds I have left here, how do we push back on this public silence writ large?
Well, we say the names, first of all, and we embrace those families. Also, Janelle Monáe has a song, Say Her Name, listing all the names of the women every December 4th. We want to make sure everybody is singing that song. Everybody is engaged. That's the way that we make sure that nobody who's lost their lives to police violence falls through the cracks. That's the one thing that we can do.
Thank you for the conversation, Professor Crenshaw. Good to have you on.
Always a pleasure, Tavis.
All the best to you. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. Stay with us.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The Justice Department is giving Texas an ultimatum. Remove a floating barrier from the Rio Grande or get sued.